welcome you tonight to this conversation between artist Shanna Moulton and our Associate Curator of Media and Performance Art, Marina Iskro. So we're grateful to have you with us, Shanna. I hope that you continue to join us online for our Hirshhorn Inside Out programs and our outstanding lineup of fall conversations in the series Talking to Our Times. That is tonight's event. Next week in this series, we will have artist Haim Steinbach in conversation with Jami Yetzer, our curator at large. And also, until next Sunday, the plaza is open, so you can visit the Liu Fan. It is the last weekend to visit the Liu Fan Open Dimension exhibition. And Sunday at 2 online from 2 to 3 p.m. there will be a conversation between choreographer Jonah Booker, who has worked with Liu Fan's work, and associate curator Anne Reeve about this commitment of Jonah to Liu Fan's work. Now, please enjoy tonight's discussion with Shanna and Marina. Thank you.
Oops. Okay. Thank you, Stefan. Thanks everyone for joining. Sorry, I was muted there. I'm super excited to be in conversation with Shanna Moulton this evening. Shanna is a California-based artist who works across performance, video, and installation to address a range of issues, including consumerism, gender, and the wellness industry. She's performed and shown her work at major institutions, including the Museum of Modern Art, the New Museum of Contemporary Art, the Kitchen, SF MoMA, the Getty, the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, and many, many more. The first work of Shanna's that I saw was a short video called Whispering Pines 7, which is about a woman cleaning her nose with a pore strip while an animated sphinx sits on her bathroom counter and sings to her. It's totally bizarre and funny and addresses the absurd but also very alluring beauty products that are marketed to women in a way that I just hadn't seen in art before. So I discovered that Shanna had created a whole world of these performances and videos featuring this character named Cynthia in her endless pursuit of wellness and self-improvement. And last year I saw an incredible show at the Zabladovich Collection in London that featured a whole video opera following Cynthia on her adventures, and we'll talk about that today. So I thought of Shanna for this series and this moment because her work is so much about solitude. The majority of her videos and her performances feature Cynthia alone in her home, searching for ways to cope with her various anxieties. I'm sure many of us can relate to Cynthia to some degree all the time, but I think that during this period of lockdowns, she is really more relatable than ever. So welcome, Shanna. Please go ahead and turn on your camera.
Thank you, Marina. Thanks so much for having me a part of the series. It's excellent to be on this platform, and thanks to Stefan.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. So I think you and I are going to look at some video clips of yours and talk for about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So if you're watching and have a question, just feel free to hit that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So I thought we could start with a short clip from an earlier video of yours, Whispering Pines 8 from 2006. So let's go ahead and show that clip and then we can get started. So we'll turn off our cameras. So Shauna, you've been performing and creating videos as your alter ego, Cynthia, since 2002. And she's so great. The New York Times, I loved this, called her a hot mess with a cult following in the global art world. Could you just start by telling us a little bit about who Cynthia is and why she's been such a useful persona for you all these years?
Sure. So Cynthia originally came from a series of dresses I was making with various medical devices embedded into the fabric, like walkers and neck braces and hemorrhoid pillows. And then I started to wonder what kind of person would need to wear one of these dresses, particularly the hemorrhoid dress. And I realized as a hypochondriac, it was me. So she started out as a sort of one-dimensional projection of the physical or psychological pain signified by the hemorrhoid pillow. And then she became more and more autobiographical and functioned as a sort of springboard for me to explore the effects of modern society. And she is really just more of a naive or unself-conscious version of myself that I use to register the effects that mass media and capitalism has on my psyche.
Yeah, great. I think you have a photo of the pillow.
Oh yeah.
That's great. Yeah, there we go.
That's the hemorrhoid pillow dress.
Yeah, and that's in Whispering Pines 1, I think, the very first video.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the objects in these videos? Because that's something that drew me to them right off the bat. The objects, I showed that clip because the objects are almost characters in themselves. They're so particular. So you're choosing these objects that a lot of them are kind of new age, kitschy decorations, or they're these extremely specialized products like the, that thing, the foamer that Cynthia uses to mix her crystal light. There's a video where you have like glasses with one lens for applying eye makeup, sort of gimmicky things like that. There's a whole episode on Activia yogurt, which is great. So I wanted to ask you why you're attracted to these objects, where you find them, and then how you see them functioning in your work.
Yeah, and you know, this, going back to this image, this is Whispering Pines 2, and that's where I started to introduce her domestic setting and decor as extensions of her personality, or even as other characters in the videos, along the lines of Walter Benjamin's idea of the furnished man, whose psyche is constituted by the objects that surround him. But it's also very connected for me to the way that objects are treated in cartoons or in Pee-wee's Playhouse, which was hugely influential, particularly in having these objects slash character friends and a set that comes alive. Yeah. And in that clip in Whispering Pines 8, it's only after drinking Crystal Light, which has aspartame and used to give my mom night terrors, that the objects come alive for Cynthia, and she discovers the sort of alchemical potential of flower arranging, and then, you know, grows a ladder that then leads her to a rave in her attic.
So great. But the objects are also pretty gendered, I think, right? They're not necessarily gender neutral. It's a lot of things that are specifically marketed to women that are beauty and wellness products.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of objects that are meant to be applied to the body in one way or another, you know, massage tools and these sort of glasses or foam rollers.
Great. So let's look at the next clip. This is now jumping forward in time to a recent work of yours that was in that Zabludovich show, The Pink Tower from 2019. So Amy, do you want to show that clip? We'll turn off our videos. So you've talked about this work, I think, as addressing the legend of Saint Barbara, Santa Barbara. There are also these fairy tale references that you'll notice, like to Sleeping Beauty when Cynthia kind of pierces her finger with the glucose monitor. And then again, when the moon kind of awakes her from her sleep. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the historical women and characters that you were thinking about when you created this piece.
Yeah, so this piece was initially inspired by the big tower on my campus. I'm at UCSB now, and there's this massive stork tower. And thinking about that in the ivory tower, and then I came across this book called The Feminist Spirituality of Saint Barbara. And I had no idea that Santa Barbara was named after a saint. And apparently she was an early Christian martyr, and perhaps the inspiration for those princes trapped in the tower stories like Rapunzel. So she was trapped in the tower by her pagan father, but then she secretly becomes Christian while up there and then is killed once she reveals that. So I was thinking about that alongside the mad woman in the attic trope from Victorian literature, and how those both resonate with Cynthia's isolation, whether that's self-imposed or not. But rather than a trapped princess, I wanted to give Cynthia some agency, so I was thinking of another female martyr on the cusp of paganism and Christianity, the Greek astronomer and mathematician Hypatia. So she starts out in this tower doing mathematical calculations as a sort of Hypatia.
That's great. I also wanted to ask you about a scene that I really love with the kind of multiple Cynthias frolicking in the field there. It's so surreal, and reminds me of so many influences that you've talked about in the past, like David Lynch and Twin Peaks, and Maya Deren and her films. So I wonder if you could talk about those influences and maybe why you find this sort of surrealistic language to be useful for you.
Yeah, my first brush with surrealism as a 13-year-old was with Twin Peaks, and that was pretty formative. And then later on, I discovered Maya Deren and some of the older surrealist films. But for me, the dreamlike logic is also very much inspired by experience with psychedelics. And there's a quote by Eric Davis, who is one of my favorite thinkers on West Coast New Age spirituality, psychedelics, cyberculture. And he wrote something like, when I began to pull away from regular drug use, I realized that I didn't want to do drugs as much as to think drugs, and to simulate their hyperconnections and magical causality and the semiotic drift as much as possible. And I really resonated with that. And I feel like I get a sort of high from forming these connections between disparate things and trying to make meaning where none exists. So in the Pink Tower, I go from those historical figures and the tower to, in the beginning, there's a sort of neural network that's actually a paper shredder, and then to Duchamp's bicycle wheel as Sleeping Beauty spindle with the glucose monitor finger prick, to the biblical burning wheel and church bells, and then multiplied figures in a maze. Mm-hmm. And then to ascending the tower with the mechanical standing desk, and finally seeing the outside world through one window, but through rose-colored glasses. And I have this is the mechanical desk I'm ascending with, and then once I look out of the tower's window, I'm seeing it through these spinning crop circles, which for me is like the rapture of seeing everything through conspiracy theories. And then I went back in the end to the historical women that are martyred by the patriarchy for having different views. So while making these connections, it feels like I'm arriving at some higher esoteric meaning. And I'm usually making the videos in this fervid rush and working all day, forsaking some of the technical mastery for immediacy. And then following that, there's a crash where I question everything I've done and feel pretty embarrassed by what I've made and reluctant to show it. So anyways, that's my brand of surrealism.
That's great. I want to just have you tell the story about reenacting Twin Peaks as a child.
Oh, also, you know, and I consider this one of my most successful videos, but sadly it's lost to some VHS tape dustbin. But I guess I was 14 by the time the finale came out, and so my cousins and me and my brother reenacted the final Red Room Black Lodge scene, and I played Laura and Bob, of course.
Didn't you? Wow, you were Bob too. That's cool. All right, so why don't we jump then to another recent project that I mentioned before. This is Whispering Pines 10, which is the video opera about Cynthia.
Great.
And we have actually a special guest with us today, if you'd like to turn on your camera. This is Nick Hallett, who collaborated with Shauna on this piece. He is a musician based in Brooklyn, New York. So maybe you two want to just introduce us to the project a little bit. Tell us how you met and how you started collaborating, and then we can show a clip.
Shauna's work was introduced to me by a curator, Montgomery Knott, and he said, I had been working with him, and he identified Shauna's work as work that I would just fall in love with, and he was absolutely right. It spoke to me in every possible way, and I heard music when I saw her work. Well, her work is already about music, and the ways in which she was using music to tell the story was very appealing to me. And she was using, you know, music from the 90s. You heard the Enya quote in Whispering Pines 8, and the ways in which Cynthia would kind of experience her reality through these tunes that we all know. They're part of our own kind of nostalgia reflex. I thought, what would it be like if the music was original? And then I also was really the idea of the soap opera and the idea that Whispering Pines was this series. I thought, what if this kind of soap opera format that Shauna is using, what if it actually was an opera? And that's kind of where I arrived, because I have this kind of operatic background, but I don't really work in traditional opera. But I thought this would be a great experiment. Why don't I approach Shauna about making a big scale work that has opera kind of inscribed on it, but it really is Shauna's work. It is her soap opera. It is her Whispering Pines series. So, and Shauna just let me kind of bring her music that inspired me. You know, I took Whispering Pines 8 was actually very, very important in terms of seeing her video and just letting the music kind of flow out of me. So I came to her with a bunch of songs and different musical themes. And she, you know, again, Marina, you talked about the importance of the objects in Shauna's work, these kinds of ready-mades. What happens if a ready-made, what does it say? What does it sing? And to give voice to these objects. So that was kind of our sandbox that Shauna and I worked in, just trying to musicalize her practice, and the Cynthia character put her in the center of this opera, and she's such an operatic character. So that's kind of where we started.
Cool. Well,
and where we finished, and where we continue.
Yes, I want to hear about the continuation after. But Amy, could you go ahead and play that clip, Whispering Pines 10?
If into
So good. So I do want to ask you, Shauna, about the sort of visual techniques that you're using in that particular scene that we looked at. But I think maybe first we should step back a little bit and just think about sort of the broader story behind Whispering Pines 10. So in many of the earlier videos, we're seeing Cynthia sort of seeking personal healing through consumer objects, through pharmaceuticals, through these little gadgets and gizmos. But here in this video, we see her sort of trying to connect to something bigger. She sees an environmental activist on TV and feels inspired. So maybe you can talk just a little bit about that story and whether you see this question of environmentalism as coming up in the work, or do you see it as commenting on art's ability or inability to engage with social issues sort of through this figure of Cynthia? What do you think?
Yeah, so the narrative of that piece, which Nick, you mentioned it was originally a performance and then an internet video. So the narrative is loosely based around Cynthia wanting to emulate the environmental activist Julia Butterfly Hill, who, if you remember, sat in an old growth giant sequoia tree in Northern California for over 2 years, did not come down in order to save it from being logged. And I think it ended in 1998. And around the same time, I was an art student interested in blending art and activism. And I was really inspired by what she did. And I was then learning the history of performance art. So I started to see her tree sit as a sort of durational performance in the tradition of Turching Shea or Linda Montano. So Whispering Pines 10 is about Cynthia wanting to emulate Hill, but failing to do so until she sacrifices her body over to the birds, which she attracts with peanut butter and birdseed at the end and then dies. So it's therefore also about
reincarnated.
But so it's about my failure in a way to blend art and activism, at least with my brand of art.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to then zoom into this scene that we were just looking at, where you're seeing Cynthia sort of climbing up through her chimney and then ascending the trunk of this redwood tree. And I think you can really see in that particular clip the way that you blend live performance and video in a way that you might think of Joan Jonas or Miranda July, artists like that. So I wonder if you could talk about what you find appealing about that kind of layering and what kinds of possibilities it opens up for you.
Yeah, I was definitely inspired by the way some artists were blending their bodies with video projection, particularly Miranda July. I saw her live performance, The Swan Tool, in 2003. And the way she was interacting with two projections was, really innovative. Also, from Robert Whitman's work and Joan Jonas. And, it seemed like blending the live presence of the body in performance with the two-dimensional space-time of video and the effects it has and the montaged time. It seemed to offer a lot of potential. And for me, it still does. And in the performance version, I'm live and my scrolling is choreographed to the movement of the tree going up. So it looks like I'm truly pushing it down. And that particular part was inspired by the movie Minority Report, where Tom Cruise is using his entire body to interface with a computer. And so I've been trying to replicate that feeling and that sort of interface in a lot of both the live performances and the videos.
I think it's also important to add that as a live performance, we developed a lot of this choreography and a lot of this vocabulary with motion sensing technology. This is previous to we, so we had a technologist, and we had gotten a new media grant to be able to really work with this very, very high tech these high-tech tools. Eventually, it all kind of got compressed into this video format, which was much easier to tour and to kind of show to you on on the web. But all of these techniques got developed through motion sensing technology.
Right. That was at the kitchen. Is that right? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So Nick, I want to ask you a question. The music is incredible, and I would love to hear you talk about sort of the process of composing it, both from the lyrical side and then the kinds of influences or sounds or vocabulary that you were drawing on for Cynthia.
Well, as I said, the music that Shauna had already been using kind of already spoke to me. So a lot of it had to do with just kind of trusting in that and trying to find an original voice for this kind of world that Shauna had already created that was inspiring me. And what I love about the possibilities is that there's this kind of experimental electronic consciousness, but also this kind of like corny radio, AM radio consciousness as well. And the world, Shauna's world, kind of embraces all these things. So that piece you just heard, which is called The Bird Song, the lyrics are about a girl who wants to become a bird, but the bird that she becomes wants to come back to girl form. And that kind of putting Cynthia in that role is, basically, I kind of wanted to escape into Cynthia. Let's just put it that way. I thought, what would it be like for me to be Cynthia, as we all have this opportunity to be Cynthia while we're watching Cynthia in all of her neurosis go through these Alice in Wonderland like tales. We all relate to her in these moments, and I just wanted to be able to escape into that. So for me, the idea of someone trying to have a kind of a state consciousness that brings you right back to where you started is something that I found very, very kind of inspiring. That failure, like the fact that it's okay to fail. How can we put that in a song that's also beautiful, that's also sentimental, that also maybe entertains, which is something that's so disapproved of in art and maybe even opera to a certain extent. I think opera, you're allowed to be more entertaining, but there has to be some kind of like level of rigor. But what if even if you're thinking about it as opera, it still has an AM radio kind of quality to it, something that is distasteful. Like, how can we look at this kind of distasteful thing and then kind of actually understand it as something very beautiful and wonderful, maybe in the way that John Cage would have us listen to the sound of the can opener as music. Maybe we also talk about the music that we hate as noise. Maybe trying to justify all that and find something beautiful in it. That's where it comes from.
Yeah, great. Well, you've mentioned like throughout this segment all the different forms that this work has taken. So it's been kind of a live performance video hybrid. It's been video art in installation form. I think, Shauna, you have an install shot of it.
Yeah.
At Zabludovich. And then most recently, it has been online as an online video opera. So could you talk a little bit about sort of maybe how it's felt different in each one of those iterations and what that process of translation was like?
The live performance also had different iterations. So it evolved quite a lot. As a live performance, we brought in a director and, fine-tuned some things. And I think a lot of that development filtered into the video/internet opera format. And so the challenge was translating the live performance gimmicks into 2D video. So actually it was Nick that had this great idea of, not just showing me scrolling up the tree, head on, but having the space of the tree rotate. And so seeing it from different angles, you realize that the tree is like a flat screen in some perspectives. So that was sort of the challenge and the most entertaining aspect of translating it into this video piece.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that was so, you know, that needed to happen in a sense, because when we had the live performance, you have this big flat video screen, and Shauna is you see her body interfacing with it, and there's something, and also the important thing about that tree is that Shauna, isn't it just a series of JPEGs you cut and paste together?
Stitched together trees, so it's, you know, it goes on and on forever.
Yeah, so the idea that here we are, here is this environmental activist who's inspiring Cynthia, but the tree that she climbs is just a series of JPEGs. And how could we take that idea that was very, very obvious in a live performance and make it translate to the video screen? Now, also, if you watch this online, you have a chance to kind of climb the tree with Cynthia. And at the specific moment where Cynthia does climb the tree, you also, the interface of the website is also kind of playing with these kinds of perspectives. So there's all sorts of different modes of flatness and dimensionality and kind of organic states and technological states that are being kind of played out. You know, they're put in context.
The swiping gesture is also the iPhone.
Yeah, exactly. The idea that you're climbing a tree by swiping your iPhone. Exactly. You know, this is.
Yeah.
And then the installation version, you know, sort of exploded the whole thing, you know, across space. And this is actually the first time I showed it was at Gregor Steiger Gallery in Zurich, and so I pulled out a lot of those animations and. So it's a sort of disorienting experience as you're watching, you know, the main video amongst, you know, the animated objects from her world.
Yeah, I loved that. So
and then just to speak to it in relationship to opera, you know, Shauna, her practice already was crossing all of these boundaries between video, between performance, and between internet art. And so I was very inspired. You know, most opera composers take inspiration from Wagner and the Gesamtkunstwerk. And here was Shauna doing it already. It just wasn't in the opera world, it's happening in the contemporary art world. And so in a certain, I like to call Whispering Pines 10 an eco-feminist Gesamtkunstwerk, because it has taken all of these forms that beyond Wagner, beyond Dali, beyond Warhol. You know, we have all of these kind of pop artists, these total art forms, and here is this very, very gentle story about environmental activism and a woman in an endangered world. And this is also this taking on this kind of very machismo, heavy laden concept of the Gesamtkunstwerk. So
I love that. So unfortunately, we have so much material, we need to keep moving. But I just want to say to everyone watching that you should go to whisperingpines10.com to watch the video opera in full in its internet form. To see the last episode, you will need a password. And you can think about the title of this show, or sorry, of this webinar.
Yeah.
And there's a big hint in there. All right, so thanks, Nick, for joining us. Thank you, Nick. So Amy, I think we can go ahead and show The Undiscovered Drawer, which is another one of Shauna's works from 2013. So, Shauna, this video obviously resonates for us very much right now. Cynthia is not only, staying home alone, she's literally trapped indoors. I wonder if you could just walk us through the ideas behind the video, and especially this motif of the puzzle box. So these boxes that can be only opened through like a complicated procedure of pressing, sliding, lifting. What were you thinking about there?
So this video was inspired both by these escape the room games that you could play physically in a room or digitally, where you solve a series of puzzles to get out of the room you're trapped in, and by seeing an exhibition at the Met of this 18th century furniture designed by the Röntgens in Germany. They made a lot of mechanical desks and drawers and dressers and a harpsichord. And at the time, this was some of the most advanced technology, the way these mechanized drawers unfolded into space with the press of a button and revealed these secret compartments. And seeing it in person, it felt very psychological, sort of like the way that memory is suppressed or revealed in the brain. And the sort of, puzzles that we undertake to figure out the self, and the fact that you need a key to unlock a lot of these drawers also felt sort of symbolic. So at the time, the idea was that Cynthia was trapped in this room and couldn't get out, and it was a metaphor for, like a lot of the other videos, the isolation that she experiences as a result of modern life in the US, with the way our lives are structured around cars and televisions and smartphones, and the nuclear family and the suburbs, and the way that it's really hard to find community sometimes. But now that we're all going through different degrees of isolation while avoiding COVID and protecting each other, I think her plight, I think it probably resonates on a different level. And Cynthia is the ultimate introvert, and some of us introverts that are enjoying some of the aspects of staying home a lot, as unhealthy as it is.
Right. I also love the sort of infinitely regressing drawer as kind of an emblem of your work in general, the way you're cutting through these layers of video, right? So you'll use a hole in one layer to almost as a portal to another layer of video and another layer. Could you talk a little bit about that and kind of the collage aspects of your work?
Yeah, I'll bring this picture up again, because that was sort of where that idea started. I realized that her hemorrhoid pillow could become a portal to her inner world, and that's what first motivated me to learn special effects, and how to cut through one layer of video to go through another layer into a sort of deeper level below the surface. And I usually use that to go between Cynthia's inner and outer worlds. And then in the undiscovered drawer, the desk also becomes a portal. I have a slide of that for Cynthia. So when she solves, the final puzzle of unlocking this desk, she needs to first reduce her height before she can go through the portal. So then her legs fold up underneath her, like the way that the drawers fold into each other. And then she's able to escape. Here, I'll move so you can see that.
Yeah.
And I also have an image of one of the original desks here too.
Super cool. So we're running out of time. So I want to just encourage people to start sending in questions if you have anything you'd like to ask Shauna, or also Nick has offered to answer questions if you have any from him. And then we want to end with a new performance, a work in progress, that Shauna would love to share with us tonight. It's about 8 or 9 minutes. So let's go ahead and play that, and then we'll do Q&A.
Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3.
I've never seen you looking so lovely as you did tonight. I've never seen you shine so bright. I've never seen so many men ask you if you wanted to dance. They're looking for a little romance, giving half the chance. And I have never seen that dress you're wearing, or the highlights in your hair that catch your eyes. I have been blind, the lady in red is dancing with me, cheek to cheek. There's nobody here. It's just you and me. It's where I wanna be, but I hardly know. There's beauty by my side. I'll never forget the way you look tonight.
Great. So Shauna, thank you so much for sharing that. You want to turn your camera back on? There we go. So is there anything you would like to say about this work before we jump into the Q&A? Or should we just go to the questions?
You know, just excited to use the possibilities of Zoom. That's, you know, been one bonus for me in this new reality, is discovering what Zoom can do and the way it sort of mirrors the way I use video. And, you know, with the ability to green screen and, you know, play videos in the background, I found it, you know, another gimmick or gadget to play with.
Absolutely. I love the "can you hear me" moment also toward the beginning. It's very Zoom. So yeah. We've got a bunch of great questions here. I'll start with this one. Aaron Adams says, I love the referencing of decorative arts and crafts with the drawers. In what ways does this correlate to your digital work? Will you continue to use this? So thinking about the connection of craft to the way you use digital tools.
Yeah, I do feel like I was really influenced by the way my mom used craft, and particularly quilting. And for me, the experience of watching her piece together quilts feels very, you know, similar to how I work within After Effects, you know, and piecing together various shapes of video and various effects. So I do feel like there's a sort of crafting aspect to video, and particularly the effects. And, you know, one of the projects I've been working on and wanting to do with students is to create a sort of video quilt with After Effects. So, you know, and besides that, the labor, the sort of bodily pain that I go through while editing or creating effects on the computer feels very similar to the kind of pain you get when you're sewing on a sewing machine for hours and hours. And, you know, a lot of these videos started with craft in a way. The dresses were a sort of, you know, initiation for Cynthia. And then I have, you know, in the past crafted a lot of the props in the videos too.
Yeah, that's great. I love this question that just came in from Elisa Ortega. She says, hi, Shauna, I would love to hear your thoughts about your relationship with embarrassment, since you mentioned it while talking about your relationship with surrealism.
Oh, that's great. And by the way, thank you, Erin and Elisa. Great questions. yeah, because the alter ego is really just me, and I don't even know if she qualifies as an alter ego. She's just me with a wig and with some distance. Um, it feels, it feels very vulnerable to enact some of these things and to address some of my, worst anxieties and fears and sort of, existential angst in the videos. So, there's not a lot of removal, and even talking about them is embarrassing for me, and performing but it feels like that's for me the most important place that, that I have the most important things to say from that perspective.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
It's 8 o'clock, but do you have a few more minutes? Because there's a couple really good questions.
sure, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Sharon Legas says, love the color and the whimsical nature of your work. Can you talk a little bit about your childhood and how you got interested in art?
Yeah, and something I forgot to mention about the genesis of the whole project is that the whole body of work with Cynthia is called Whispering Pines. Even pieces that don't have that title and a number, I still think of them as that body of work. And it's named after the mobile home park I grew up in between Fresno and Yosemite, California. And it was actually my parents owned the park, and we lived, in a house that was shaped like a trailer within the park, and it was a senior mobile home park. So my playmates growing up were the other senior citizens in the park, and I would go over and play with their puzzles and admire their sort of kitsch decor and altars, and play with the cats and the birds they had. So that was really formative, working and playing with seniors, not having a lot of kids to interact with.
Right.
And it was also, a very rural, small town. So it was beautiful, but also somewhat stifling socially for me. And I was really, really happy to leave, and go off to college. But I do, I go back and I'll stay with my parents for extended times. And I do I love it there. It's wonderful. But, it's like the Bible Belt of California.
Let's see. Ida Greenberg says, do you have any favorite props or stories about how specific objects have worked their way into your films?
Yeah, I think the most exciting instances, with props and discovery are when I find something in like a thrift store or in a yard sale, and I don't know what its function is, but somehow it's appealing formally. And those sort of objects often get incorporated into works. And the one I'm thinking of in particular is Whispering Pines 9, where Cynthia has some objects, and then she's watching an episode of Antiques Roadshow, and someone's having something appraised for a lot of money. And Cynthia remembers that something in her house looks very similar. So she then goes on a pilgrimage to the site of the Antiques Roadshow to have it appraised. And it turns out that she just has a sort of faux reproduction of what was an authentic object. But rather than it having any monetary value, once they turn it on the Antiques Roadshow, it produces legs for her. So I forgot to mention that throughout that episode, she doesn't have any legs, but then in the end, this object that didn't really have monetary value according to Antiques Roadshow produces something else for her. So that's one example. And in that same video, there's a couple of other objects that are originally massage tools that then I wrapped with yarn and incorporated into staffs and made them look like a sort of ceremonial object.
Right. This is a question, I think it's about the new performance. Brigitte Rathsman says, did you use the Zoom green screen?
Oh yes, I did. Yeah, it took me a while to figure out the best way to use it, but it's actually quite good. And I'm impressed with the quality of Zoom and the Zoom recordings. And it's not like the ultimate in high quality, but yes, thanks, Birgit, for that question. I definitely try out the green screen.
Cool. So actually, Nick, are you still here? Do you want to pop back in for just a music question? Great. So there are a couple of questions about music. One is about how you make your choices of the particular pop music that you use. And another one is about the appropriation of pop music in your work. So maybe just expanding a little bit on the music aspect.
Well, I actually think both of those questions are for
Maybe for
Shauna, because
Yeah.
I only write the original music. Shauna chooses her own pop music to respond to.
Yeah, I mean, although I do think, Nick, you speak so well to my choices in music, but
Well,
um,
and I will say that the Vangelis clip in the drawer is something that something we were listening to together during that residency where you were working on that piece. So I think there's also a shared love of certain kinds of music, and also one thing that's important about the way Shauna uses music is she's very into covers and remixes, and both of the idea of the cover and the idea of the remix, they tessellate out from the idea of the music into the image and the story.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that's very important about how Shauna uses music and how she uses the pop music. You see her playing hammered dulcimer, but it's the Coldplay. You hear Crystal, you hear the Enya song, but it's like this cheap MIDI version, before computers could make really reasonable sounds. They still probably can't, but this is 15 years ago when they really couldn't. But then we're hearing songs that we recognize and love or hate through these covers, through these remixes. And then Shauna will take that same idea, and then we'll hear the real. Do we ever really hear Enya? We just hear the rave.
Yeah.
We hear the rave version. Suddenly, this like tinny computer MIDI. Suddenly, it becomes
And
this
that was like
remix.
foundational for that particular piece. That sort of started the whole narrative, is going from the MIDI version of that Enya song to I think it was the real version, and then to the rave remix.
So it becomes this very anthemic thing. It becomes this huge, amazing, moving thing that also you don't see it. You really have to see Whispering Pines 8, but it has this transmogrifying effect. And anyway,
And
Whispering Pines 8, people.
And choosing that particular song was important for me because I have this memory of it being the soundtrack to the Crystal Light commercial in the 80s. And it's like killing me that I can't find evidence of that online, because, these days you're able to find anything like that. It's just there, it exists. But that is one thing I look like at least once a year and I cannot find it. So maybe that wasn't actually the soundtrack, but that's how I associate it.
That's so funny. I didn't know that. So we are way over time, but maybe just to close out, you guys could tell us about what you're working on next. Maybe.
Well, we're always working on things. And, a year ago, Shauna had a float in the Nuit Blanche Paris night parade for millions of Parisians. It's something that's so unthinkable now, and I made music for that. We're waiting for a major institution to commission Whispering Pines 11, and in the meantime, we make all sorts of different kinds of things, and they all fall into the category of remix. So you'll often see little bits of Whispering Pines 10, but they'll have been transformed into something else, and we'll do these little mixtapes with pop songs, and I will sing Shauna's pop, whatever Shauna wants to hear. I lost something in the hills. I'll sing that. So we do these live performances that are a kind of a fusion of Shauna's Shauna's use of music and my original music, and they have a real mixtape quality to them, I think.
Great.
But we also are, we're slowly developing a new major piece, the Whispering Pines 11.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And I have a couple of shows that were originally slated for this past summer, but have been pushed into the next year. And I'm sure that much of it will involve Nick's music. But I probably won't know the nature of those installations until about 5 weeks before the opening. So, but you know, I'm planning to incorporate a lot of this experimentation that I've been working with in Zoom.
Awesome. Can't wait to see it. So thanks both of you. Thanks, Shauna. Thanks, Nick, for being here tonight. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This will be archived on the Hirshhorn's website if you missed the beginning or want to share it with anyone. So thanks again.
Thanks so much, Marina.
Bye.